A desperate puppy runs up to a cop, barking and tugging at his pant leg, begging for help. At first, he thinks it's just a lost pet, until he checks its collar and sees something that makes his blood run cold. Within seconds, he locks down the entire street, calling for backup. Because what's on that collar isn't just a name. It's a chilling message that could mean life or death. Who sent it? What terrifying secret is this small, helpless puppy carrying? And will the officer uncover the truth before it's too late? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty sidewalks as Officer Ryan Brooks lifted his coffee cup to his lips, savoring the last lukewarm sips. His patrol car sat idle, its engine ticking as it cooled in the quiet night air. The neighborhood around him slept peacefully, with only the distant whisper of highway traffic breaking the silence. Ryan checked his watch. 11:45 p.m. Almost time to head back to the station. He'd been working missing persons cases for 3 years now, and nights like these, quiet, uneventful, were both a blessing and a curse. They meant no one was in trouble, but they also gave his mind too much time to wander back to old cases, faces he couldn't forget. Just as he reached for his car door handle, something tugged at his pant leg. Ryan startled, nearly spilling what remained of his coffee. Looking down, he found himself staring into the soulful brown eyes of a German Shepherd puppy. The little dog couldn't have been more than a few months old, its fur ruffled and slightly matted as if it had been running through bushes. The puppy whined, a high-pitched sound of distress that made Ryan's cop instinct snap to attention. It pulled at his uniform again, more urgently this time. "Hey there, little one," Ryan said softly, crouching down. The puppy's tail wasn't wagging. Instead, it stood rigid, alert. Something was definitely wrong. Ryan reached for the collar, expecting to find an address or phone number. Instead, his fingers touched paper. Carefully, he extracted a crumpled note tucked inside the collar. The streetlight provided just enough illumination to read the hastily scrawled message. His heart dropped as he made out the words. "Help. They took my son. 212 Maple Street. Hurry." The handwriting was shaky, desperate, the kind of writing that came from someone in genuine fear. Ryan's hand moved to his radio immediately, muscle memory taking over as adrenaline surged through his system. "Dispatch, this is Officer Brooks. I need immediate backup." He paused, looking at the note again. 212 Maple Street. Possible kidnapping in progress. Run that address for me. The puppy barked sharply, tugging at his pants again with more determination. Its eyes never left Ryan's face, as if measuring his response, making sure he understood the urgency of the situation. "Copy that, Officer Brooks. Running the address now. Backup is being dispatched." Ryan's mind raced through protocols and procedures, but something about this situation felt different. The puppy's intelligence, the hidden note, this wasn't random. He grabbed his tactical flashlight from his belt and checked his sidearm. The German Shepherd pup darted a few steps away, then looked back at him expectantly. Another sharp bark echoed through the quiet street. Ryan jogged to his squad car, his coffee forgotten on the hood. As he slid behind the wheel, the puppy jumped into the passenger seat without hesitation. Ryan hit the lights but kept the siren silent. No need to announce their arrival just yet. As he pulled away from the curb, he noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. The puppy wasn't confused or scared. It sat upright, alert, its eyes fixed on the road ahead as if it knew exactly where they needed to go. The squad car's headlights cut through the darkness as Ryan pulled up to 212 Maple Street. From the outside, the two-story house looked perfectly ordinary. White trim, well-maintained lawn, even a welcome mat by the front steps. but something made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The front door swayed slightly in the night breeze, neither fully closed nor wide open. The German Shepherd puppy jumped out as soon as Ryan opened the car door. Its entire body tensed, a low whine escaping as its ears flattened against its head. Ryan drew his weapon, keeping it pointed downward as he approached the house. "Stay close," he whispered to the pup, though he wasn't sure why. The dog seemed to understand, padding silently beside him. The welcome mat crunched under his boots as he reached the door. Ryan pressed his back against the wall, listening. The house was quiet, too quiet. No TV noise, no talking, nothing but the soft creak of the door in the wind. Taking a deep breath, Ryan entered, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The entryway opened into a living room where a table lamp flickered, casting unstable shadows across family photos on the walls. His stomach tightened at what he saw next. A man and woman sat bound to dining room chairs, duct tape wrapped around their arms and legs. Their faces were wet with tears, and angry red marks showed where they'd struggled against their restraints. The woman's chest heaved with panicked breaths, her eyes wide with terror. The man thrashed against his bonds, desperate sounds muffled by the tape across his mouth. Ryan quickly crossed the room, holstering his weapon to free them. He carefully pulled the tape from the man's mouth first. "Where's your son?" Ryan asked, already dreading the answer. The woman's voice came out between gasping sobs. "They took him! They took Lucas!" The sudden roar of an engine shattered the night. Ryan whirled toward the window just in time to see a dark van's taillights flaring to life. The vehicle's tires squealed against pavement as it accelerated away from the house. The puppy's reaction was immediate. Its fur bristled along its spine, and a deep growl rumbled from its throat before it bolted for the door. Ryan didn't waste a second. He sprinted after the dog, his radio already in hand as he ran. "Dispatch, suspects fleeing the scene in a dark-colored van, heading east on Maple. Officer in pursuit. Child abduction confirmed." The puppy was already halfway down the street, running full tilt after the van. Ryan jumped into his squad car, engine roaring to life as his radio crackled with confirmation of incoming backup. He hit the lights and siren, tires squealing as he accelerated after the kidnapper's vehicle. The chase was on. The squad car's engine roared as Ryan pursued the van through the darkened streets. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as the vehicle ahead swerved dangerously, cutting corners and blowing through stop signs. The van's driver was desperate, taking increasingly risky maneuvers to shake him off. "Dispatch, heading west on Oak Street," Ryan called into his radio. "Requesting additional units to intercept." The response crackled back immediately. "Units en route, but ETA is 8 minutes. Ryan's jaw clenched. 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours. He was on his own. Through his windshield, he caught glimpses of the German Shepherd puppy, somehow keeping pace despite its small size. Its determination sparked something in Ryan's chest. The pup hadn't given up, and neither would he. The van careened around another corner, tires screeching. Ryan watched as the driver struggled to maintain control, weaving erratically. An idea struck him. Timing it carefully, he flashed his high beams repeatedly, filling the van's mirrors with blinding light. The effect was immediate. The van swerved sharply, its driver momentarily disoriented. Ryan closed the distance, heart pounding against his ribs. Suddenly, the van made a hard right onto a narrow side street, one Ryan recognized as having no surveillance cameras. His stomach dropped as the van disappeared from view. He pulled up to the intersection, scanning desperately for any sign of the vehicle. A sharp bark cut through the night. The puppy sat in the middle of the road, its entire body rigid with alertness. It barked again, more insistent this time. Ryan killed the engine and jumped out, drawing his flashlight. The beam caught something flutter in the breeze. A small piece of fabric caught on a chain-link fence. Moving closer, he found another scrap a few feet away, then another. They formed a clear trail leading away from the street. The pieces clicked into place. The kidnappers had abandoned the van, hoping to slip away on foot. Ryan grabbed his radio, quickly relaying his location and findings to dispatch. The puppy was already trotting toward a dark alleyway, nose to the ground, tracking something only it could detect. Ryan checked his weapon, then looked at the determined little dog. The real chase was just beginning. Ryan crept through the alley, his footsteps echoing softly against the brick walls. The industrial district loomed ahead, a maze of abandoned buildings with broken windows that gaped like hungry mouths in the darkness. The puppy padded silently beside him, its nose twitching as it followed an invisible trail. Scattered pieces of fabric continued to mark their path, each one making Ryan's pulse quicken. The kidnappers had been careless, or perhaps too rushed to notice they were leaving a trail. A rusted sign creaked in the wind, catching Ryan's flashlight beam. Miller's Storage, closed for renovation. The letters were faded, barely legible against the weathered metal. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he studied the building. The windows were boarded up, and thick chains hung loosely from the front door, recently cut. The puppy whined softly, pawing at the entrance. Ryan nodded, understanding the silent signal. This was it. Keeping his gun steady, Ryan eased the heavy door open. It groaned on its hinges, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet night. Dust particles danced in his flashlight beam as he swept it across the room. Broken wooden crates were scattered everywhere, creating deep shadows perfect for hiding. Then he heard it, a small, frightened whimper that made his heart skip. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Ryan spotted a small figure huddled in the center of the room. Lucas sat on the concrete floor, arms wrapped tightly around his knees. His clothes were filthy, face streaked with tears and dirt, but he was alive. Relief flooded through Ryan's chest, but years of experience kept him alert. Something wasn't right. The setup was too perfect, too easy. Why would kidnappers go through all this trouble just to leave their victim alone in an abandoned building? Lucas's eyes went wide with terror. The boy shook his head frantically, pointing behind Ryan. A shadow shifted in the darkness. Before Ryan could turn, a dark figure burst from behind a stack of crates, making a desperate dash for the exit. But the puppy was faster. With a fierce growl that seemed impossible from such a small body, it launched itself at the fleeing man, sharp teeth finding purchase in his ankle. The kidnapper stumbled, crying out in pain. Ryan didn't waste the opportunity. He tackled the man hard, driving him to the ground. The sound of handcuffs clicking into place was drowned out by approaching sirens as backup finally arrived. Lucas scrambled to his feet and ran to Ryan, small hands clutching the officer's shirt like a lifeline. The boy buried his face in Ryan's chest, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Outside, red and blue lights painted the walls as police cars surrounded the building. The puppy sat nearby, tail wagging slightly as it watched over them both. The warehouse buzzed with activity as emergency vehicles' lights painted the walls in alternating red and blue. Officers moved with purpose, securing evidence and establishing a perimeter while paramedics gently examined Lucas. The boy sat quietly on the back of an ambulance, his small frame wrapped in a shock blanket. His eyes never left the ground, and his arms remained locked around the German Shepherd puppy that had led them here. Ryan knelt beside Lucas, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly, but the words seemed to float in the air between them. Lucas didn't respond. Instead, his fingers dug deeper into the puppy's fur, holding on to his four-legged protector as if afraid it might disappear. The arrested kidnapper sat in the back of a nearby patrol car, his face a mask of defiance. Ryan studied him through the window. The man's scruffy appearance and nervous eyes didn't match the sophisticated operation they'd stumbled into. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Sergeant Holloway approached the patrol car, his weathered face set in determination. The detective opened the door and leaned in, but the suspect remained stone-faced, his lips pressed into a thin line. No amount of questioning seemed to crack his resolve. Ryan paced near the warehouse entrance, his mind racing. Why would professional kidnappers go through all this trouble only to leave their victim behind, unharmed? The whole scenario felt staged, like a piece of a larger puzzle they couldn't see. Officers combed through the warehouse and the abandoned van, documenting everything they found. The scene was oddly clean, too clean for a rushed getaway. "Sir!" a forensic tech called out, waving Ryan over to the van. "We found something you need to see." Under the driver's seat, tucked away but not hidden, they discovered a burner phone. The tech handed it to Ryan with gloved hands. A single message glowed on the screen. "Change of plans. Yes, leave the kid. We'll finish this later." Ryan's fingers tightened around the phone as the implications sank in. This wasn't a failed kidnapping. It was part of something bigger. The real perpetrators were still out there, watching, waiting. The puppy barked softly from where it sat with Lucas, as if sensing the tension in the air. Ryan looked between the phone in his hand and the traumatized boy still clutching his furry savior. Whatever game these people were playing, they weren't done yet. The drive back to the police station was tense and quiet. Ryan kept glancing in his rearview mirror at Lucas, who sat sandwiched between his parents in the back seat. The German Shepherd puppy lay across the boy's lap, its warm presence seeming to provide more comfort than any words could. Lucas's hands trembled as they stroked the dog's fur, his eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see. "You're okay, sweetheart. You're safe," his mother whispered, pulling him closer. But Ryan noticed how her own voice quivered, the fear still raw in her eyes as she held her son. Her arms wrapped around Lucas protectively, as if she could shield him from the world itself. At the station, Ryan led them to a quiet office away from the bustle of the main floor. He grabbed some warm blankets from the emergency supplies and wrapped them around Lucas's shoulders, while another officer brought in a steaming cup of hot cocoa. The boy sat in a large chair that seemed to swallow his small frame, the puppy never leaving his side. While Sergeant Holloway took Lucas's parents to another room for their statements, Ryan stayed with Lucas. He noticed a small stuffed bear sitting on a nearby shelf, one they kept for situations just like this, and handed it to the boy. "Lucas," Ryan said gently, keeping his voice soft and steady, "can you tell me anything about the men who took you?" Lucas's fingers tightened in the puppy's fur, and for a long moment he stayed silent. The only sound in the room was the quiet whir of the heating system and the gentle lapping of the dog's tongue as it tried to comfort its young friend. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "They had masks." He paused, swallowing hard. They said they weren't supposed to hurt me." Ryan leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowing. "Supposed to?" Lucas nodded, his eyes still fixed on the puppy. "They said they were waiting for the real buyer." The words hit Ryan like a physical blow, and he felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. This wasn't a simple kidnapping for ransom. This wasn't about money from the parents. This was trafficking, and Lucas had never been meant to return home at all. The police station hummed with frantic energy as Ryan stood before the assembled team, his face grim. Officers rushed back and forth, phones rang constantly, and the air crackled with urgency. He'd just finished explaining Lucas's revelation, and the implications sent a chill through the room. "This isn't just about one kid," Ryan said, his voice tight. "We're looking at an organized trafficking operation." Sergeant Holloway nodded grimly from his desk, his computer screen casting a blue glow on his weathered face. "Got something on our suspect, Frank Dorsey." He turned the screen so everyone could see. "Petty theft, couple of B&Es, nothing violent. This guy's small time." "A hired hand," Ryan muttered, studying the mugshot. "Someone else is calling the shots." In the interrogation room, Frank Dorsey sat hunched over the metal table, his fingers drumming nervously. Holloway took the lead, with Ryan watching from the corner, arms crossed. 20 years, Holloway said, dropping a thick folder on the table. "That's what you're looking at. Kidnapping, endangering a minor, conspiracy." Wait. Frank's tough guy act crumbled. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he glanced between the two officers. "Look, I don't know much, okay? I was just supposed to grab the kid and bring him to a guy, a broker. He's the one in charge." Ryan stepped forward, placing both hands on the table. "A broker? Who?" Frank squirmed in his chair, looking anywhere but at the officers. Finally, he mumbled, "Mason Kincaid." The name hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. Mason Kincaid was infamous in law enforcement circles, a shadow figure suspected of running one of the largest trafficking networks in the region. But no one had ever managed to build a case against him. He was too careful, too protected. Through the interrogation room's glass wall, Ryan could see Lucas sitting in the office across the hall. The boy was curled up in his chair, the loyal puppy still pressed against his side. Looking at that small, vulnerable figure, Ryan felt a mix of relief and dread. Lucas had escaped something far worse than they'd initially thought. But the danger wasn't over. Kincaid was still out there, and now they finally had a lead. Ryan paced the safe house's perimeter, his footsteps quiet on the wooden floors. The modest two-story home sat tucked away in a residential neighborhood, far from the city's busy streets. Security cameras monitored every angle, and unmarked police cars patrolled the area regularly. Inside, Lucas's parents tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but their worried glances and hushed conversations revealed their fear. Ryan understood their anxiety. Mason Kincaid wasn't someone who left loose ends. "We'll keep him safe," Ryan assured them, checking the windows for the 100th time. "No one knows about this location." As night fell, the house grew quiet, except for the soft padding of paws on hardwood floors. The German Shepherd puppy moved from room to room, nose twitching, ears rotating like tiny radar dishes. Ryan watched the dog with growing respect. That little pup had already proven itself more reliable than any security system. In the living room, Ryan settled into an armchair facing the front door, his gun within easy reach. The house creaked and settled around him, but he'd learned to distinguish between normal sounds and potential threats. Around midnight, soft footsteps caught his attention. Lucas appeared in the hallway, a small shadow in Pokémon pajamas. The puppy trotted beside him, staying close to his legs. "Can't sleep?" Ryan asked softly. Lucas shook his head, moving closer. "Milo doesn't like it here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Ryan offered a gentle smile, trying to put the boy at ease. "Milo? That's his name." Lucas scratched behind the puppy's ears, and for the first time since the rescue, a hint of a smile touched his face. "Well, Milo's a smart dog," Ryan said, reaching out to pat the pup's head. "He kept you safe before. He won't stop now." Milo's tail wagged slightly at the praise, but his ears remained alert, constantly monitoring their surroundings. Ryan had seen trained police dogs with less focus than this small pup. Just as Ryan was about to guide Lucas back to bed, His phone vibrated against his hip. The message from dispatch made his heart race. "Kincaid's people are moving. We just intercepted a van loaded with kids. This is bigger than we thought." Ryan's jaw clenched as he read the message again. The scope of Kincaid's operation was expanding before their eyes. This wasn't just about Lucas anymore. There were other children out there, trapped in Kincaid's web. This wasn't a simple kidnapping case. It had become a full-scale rescue mission. He looked at Lucas, still standing there in his oversized pajamas, and thought of all the other children who hadn't been as lucky, who didn't have a brave puppy to help them escape. Ryan's determination hardened. He wouldn't let another child suffer what Lucas had endured. The safe house settled into its nighttime quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic and the soft whir of the air conditioning. Ryan sat in the living room's dim glow, his phone's blue light illuminating his tired face as he scrolled through case files. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift to Lucas, who had fallen asleep on the couch after refusing to go to bed upstairs. The boy looked peaceful for the first time in days, one hand resting on Milo's fur. The German Shepherd puppy remained vigilant even in rest, his tiny ears twitching at every creak and whisper of sound. Ryan had come to trust those ears more than any security system. A sharp knock cut through the silence. Ryan's hand moved to his holster, body tensing. He approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole. Relief flooded through him as he recognized Sergeant Holloway's familiar silhouette. Opening the door, Ryan noticed immediately that something was wrong. Holloway's face was drawn tight, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by genuine concern. "We got something," Holloway said quietly, stepping inside. His eyes darted to Lucas's sleeping form before he motioned Ryan toward the kitchen. Under the soft kitchen lights, Holloway pulled out his phone, showing Ryan photos from a recent bust. "Police unit intercepted a van just outside city limits. Found kids inside." He paused, swallowing hard. None of them Lucas's age, though. All younger. 6, maybe 7 years old. Ryan's mind raced, pieces falling into place like a terrible puzzle. He thought about Lucas, 10 years old and scared, left alone in that warehouse. It hadn't made sense at the time, but now. "They deal in younger kids," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas was a mistake. He wasn't meant to be taken. Holloway nodded grimly. "And they're still looking for him." Ryan's stomach clenched as the full picture emerged. This wasn't some amateur kidnapping ring making random grabs. This was a calculated business operation with specific targets and buyers. And Lucas, brave, resilient Lucas, was the only one who'd gotten away. The only witness who could identify any of them. Back in the living room, Milo's head lifted suddenly, ears perked forward. The puppy's eyes fixed on the window, a low whine building in his throat. Ryan and Holloway exchanged glances, both reaching for their weapons. They weren't dealing with desperate criminals anymore. They were up against professionals who wouldn't stop until they cleaned up their mistake. The sharp, urgent barking jolted Ryan from his light sleep. His trained instincts kicked in before his mind fully cleared, hand already gripping his weapon as Milo's frantic warning echoed through the safe house. The sound of shattering glass from the kitchen confirmed the puppy's alert. Ryan moved swiftly through the darkened house, his footsteps silent against the carpet. Behind him, doors creaked open as Lucas's parents emerged from their rooms, their faces pale in the dim light. "Stay back," Ryan whispered firmly, motioning them toward Lucas's room. The kitchen was eerily still, broken glass glittering on the floor like scattered diamonds under the moonlight. The cool night air drifted through the broken window, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Ryan reached the back door in 3 quick strides, throwing it open. His gun swept the darkness, following the retreating shadow of a figure sprinting across the yard. The intruder moved with purpose, but made no attempt to circle back or engage. They weren't here to grab Lucas, not tonight. Something red caught Ryan's eye, drawing his attention to the doorstep. A small card lay there, its bright color stark against the concrete. Ryan crouched down, keeping one eye on the darkness as he retrieved it. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for business cards. Flipping it over, his jaw tightened at the single word written in bold black ink: "Return." Behind him, the sound of small feet padding across the floor made him turn. Lucas stood in the kitchen doorway, Milo held tightly in his arms. The puppy's fur was standing on end, a low growl rumbling in his tiny chest as he stared into the darkness beyond the door. "They found us," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling with fear. Ryan's fingers tightened around the card, his knuckles turning white. This wasn't just about getting Lucas back anymore. This was Kincaid's network sending a clear message. They weren't going to stop. Ryan clenched his jaw, anger burning in his chest. He'd spent his career protecting people, and he wasn't about to back down now. The morning sun filtered through the station's windows as Ryan stood before a small group of hand-picked officers. Sergeant Holloway paced at the front of the room, his weathered face etched with determination. Maps and surveillance photos covered the walls, evidence of Kincaid's growing network. "The safe house is burned," Holloway announced, his voice grave. "We need a new strategy." Ryan stepped forward, spreading out a detailed map of the city highways. "We can't keep playing defense. It's time to bring them to us." The room fell silent as Ryan outlined his plan. A controlled setup, leak information about Lucas's transport route, make it seem like they were moving him to a more secure location. With careful planning, they could choose the ground, set the terms. "It's risky," one officer commented. "Everything about this is risky," Ryan replied. "But right now they're calling the shots. We need to change that." When they presented the plan to Lucas's parents, his mother's face paled. "You want to use my son as bait?" Her voice cracked with fear and anger. Ryan knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Not bait. We'll have complete control. Every inch of the route will be covered. I swear to you, we won't let anything happen to him." "I want to do it." Everyone turned to look at Lucas, who stood in the doorway with Milo in his arms. The puppy's tail wagged slowly, sensing the tension in the room. "I trust Officer Ryan," Lucas said quietly but firmly. His small face showed a determination that seemed beyond his years. Ryan felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just about protecting a witness anymore. This was about a brave little boy who had already faced more darkness than any child should. The plan came together quickly. Unmarked cars were positioned along the route. Officers in civilian clothes took up strategic positions. Every detail was checked and double-checked. As twilight approached, Ryan helped Lucas into the back seat of an unmarked SUV. Milo hopped in beside him, instantly alert and watchful. The puppy had proven himself more than just a pet. He was Lucas's guardian, and he took that role seriously. "Remember," Ryan said softly, "no matter what happens, stay down and stay quiet. Milo will stay with you." Lucas nodded, one hand buried in Milo's fur. The trust in his eyes made Ryan's chest ache. The engine hummed to life, and they pulled onto the street. 2 patrol cars followed at a distance, looking casual but ready. The night was clear, the roads mostly empty. Perfect conditions for their plan. As they turned onto a stretch of empty highway, Ryan checked his mirrors. For several minutes there was nothing but darkness and the occasional passing car. Then headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. They had taken the bait. Ryan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as the black SUV behind them suddenly accelerated. The vehicle lurched forward, its headlights flooding their mirrors with harsh light. In one violent motion, the SUV swerved, trying to force them toward the guardrail. In the back seat, Milo's sharp barks filled the car. Lucas remained completely still, his small hands gripping the seatbelt so tight his knuckles turned white. His face was pale in the rearview mirror, but his eyes stayed focused and alert. "Stay down, Lucas," Ryan called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. The boy immediately ducked lower, Milo pressing protectively against his side. The radio crackled as Ryan spoke into it, maintaining his composure. "They've made their move. We need units now." The words had barely left his mouth when the SUV rammed into their back bumper. The impact sent them lurching forward, tires squealing against the asphalt. Ryan fought with the wheel, muscles straining as he kept the car from spinning out. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his training kicked in. They just needed to hold on until backup arrived. The trap was set. Now they had to spring it. Headlights suddenly blazed from their left. A second black SUV pulled alongside them, matching their speed. Ryan's stomach dropped. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a coordinated attack. They were coming for Lucas. The two SUVs worked in tandem, trying to box them in. Metal scraped against metal as they closed the distance, the sound piercing through the night air. Just as the vehicles began their final push, the darkness erupted with red and blue lights. Police cruisers seemed to materialize from every direction, their sirens wailing. Holloway's team executed their plan perfectly, cutting off every possible escape route. The SUVs were surrounded before they could react. Ryan brought their vehicle to a controlled stop, drawing his weapon as he stepped out. The driver of the first SUV slowly raised his hands, but Ryan barely noticed him. His attention was fixed on the figure emerging from the second vehicle. Mason Kincaid stepped out into the flashing lights, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Their eyes met across the distance. They had him. The night air crackled with tension as police lights painted the highway in alternating flashes of red and blue. Officers moved in with practiced precision, their weapons trained on the surrounded SUVs. Ryan stepped forward, his stance firm as he watched Mason Kincaid emerge from the second vehicle. Kincaid moved with an unsettling grace, taking his time to adjust the sleeves of his tailored suit. His silver hair caught the strobing lights, and his face held an expression of mild amusement rather than concern. He carried himself like a CEO, stepping out of a board meeting rather than a man caught in a police sting. Behind Ryan, he could hear Lucas's parents arriving in a police escort, their voices tight with worry. But his focus remained locked on Kincaid, studying the man's every movement. "On the ground! Hands where we can see them!" Holloway's voice boomed across the scene. Kincaid's men complied immediately, dropping to their knees with their hands raised. But Kincaid simply lifted his hands in an almost lazy gesture, his lips curving into a practiced smile. "Officer, this must be a misunderstanding." His voice was smooth, cultured, carrying none of the tension that typically came with arrest. Ryan's jaw clenched as he recognized the game being played. He'd seen countless criminals try to talk their way out of custody, but Kincaid's demeanor was different. There was no desperation in his eyes, no crack in his composed facade, just pure, calculated confidence. Kincaid's gaze drifted toward the police car where Lucas sat with Milo. The German Shepherd puppy's growls were audible even from this distance, his small body pressed protectively against Lucas's side. Something dark flickered in Kincaid's eyes as his smirk widened. "You really don't know what you've gotten yourself into, do you?" Kincaid's words carried across the space between them, soft but clear. Ryan felt his stomach twist. The ease of this capture, Kincaid's relaxed demeanor, It all felt wrong. They'd caught him, yes, but something told Ryan this was far from over. Through the one-way mirror, Ryan watched as Kincaid sat in the interrogation room, looking more like he was waiting for a business meeting than facing serious criminal charges. The man's expensive suit remained crisp despite the night's events, his posture relaxed and confident. Sergeant Holloway stood beside Ryan, arms crossed. "Something's not right," he muttered, echoing Ryan's own thoughts. "Guy like this should be sweating bullets." Instead, Kincaid was examining his manicured nails, occasionally glancing at his reflection in the mirror with an almost bored expression. The evidence against him was solid. They had him at the scene, attempting to kidnap Lucas. Multiple witnesses, DNA from the safe house break-in. Everything pointed to a clear conviction. But Ryan's gut wouldn't let him celebrate. Men like Kincaid didn't build criminal empires by being careless. They didn't get caught unless they wanted to be caught. There had to be more to this. His phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him from his thoughts. Lucas's mother's name flashed on the screen. When he answered, her voice came through in panicked gasps. "They let them go," she cried, her words tumbling out between sobs. "The other men, bail was posted. How could they just let them walk out?" Ryan's stomach plummeted. "What? When?" "Just now. They're gone." Her voice cracked with hysteria. "How is this possible?" Ryan's hand tightened around the phone as the reality sank in. Kincaid's influence reached further than they'd imagined. He had people inside the system, people with the power to make things happen, to make problems disappear. That's why Kincaid wasn't worried. He never had been. Anger surged through Ryan's veins as he pushed past Holloway and threw open the interrogation room door. Kincaid didn't even flinch at the sudden entrance, his calm smile never wavering. Ryan planted his hands on the metal table, leaning forward. "You think you're walking away from this?" Kincaid's chuckle was soft, almost patronizing, as he leaned back in his chair. "I don't think, officer." His eyes met Ryan's with cold amusement. "I know." The truth hit Ryan like a physical blow. They weren't just fighting one man or one organization. They were up against something much bigger, a network that had wrapped its tendrils around the very system meant to stop it. The emergency meeting room crackled with tension as department heads gathered around the long table. Coffee cups sat untouched, faces grim with exhaustion and frustration. Sergeant Holloway, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, paced at the head of the table. "We had them!" His fist crashed down, making several officers jump. "How the hell did they get bail within hours?" The silence that followed was deafening. Officers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, avoiding eye contact. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. Ryan stood up slowly, his voice steady but firm. "We have a leak. Someone inside helped them." The words landed like stones in still water. A few gasps, then more uncomfortable silence. Chief Martinez rubbed his temples, looking decades older than his 50 years. "That's a serious accusation, Brooks," he said quietly. "It's the only explanation that makes sense," Ryan pressed. "The timing, the paperwork. It was too perfect, too fast." Back at their desks, Ryan and Holloway hunched over a computer screen, reviewing security footage from the previous night. Hours of mundane hallway activity flickered past their tired eyes. "Wait," Ryan suddenly pointed. "Go back." Holloway rewound the footage. There, at 11:42 p.m., just minutes before Kincaid's men were released, Detective Mark Calloway slipped out of a side entrance, looking over his shoulder. "Calloway?" Holloway whispered in disbelief. "He's been with us 15 years. Ryan's blood ran cold as they watched Calloway hurry to his car. The timestamp matched perfectly with when the bail paperwork would have been processed. The parking garage was nearly empty when Ryan caught up with Calloway. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows between the concrete pillars. "Who are you working for?" Ryan's voice echoed off the walls. Calloway froze, his face draining of color. His hand twitched toward his jacket, but Ryan already had his weapon drawn. "Don't," Ryan warned. The screech of tires cut through the tension. Headlights suddenly flooded the garage as a black sedan came roaring around the corner. Ryan's training kicked in. He lunged forward, shoving Calloway aside as gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Calloway cried out, crimson blooming across his shoulder as he crumpled to the ground. Ryan dove behind a nearby car, drawing his weapon. Bullets pinged off metal and concrete around him. Glass shattered. Car alarms wailed. He pressed himself against the cold metal of the car. Heart pounding, gun ready. The war had just escalated. Ryan watched helplessly as the black car's taillights vanished into the darkness, the echo of gunfire still ringing in his ears like distant thunder. Beside him, Sergeant Holloway pressed his hands against Calloway's bleeding shoulder, dark red seeping between his fingers and staining the asphalt beneath them. "Stay with us, Mark," Holloway commanded, his voice firm but tinged with betrayal. The years of friendship made the hurt in his tone unmistakable. "Why'd you do it? All these years?" Calloway's face was pale as paper, his breathing shallow and uneven. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. They have everything on me. Didn't have a choice." His words came out as barely more than a whisper. "There's always a choice," Ryan said, kneeling beside them on the rough pavement. "Where are they taking the kids, Mark? What's Kincaid planning?" He fought to keep the urgency from his voice, knowing that pushing too hard might make Calloway shut down completely. Calloway's eyes fluttered, struggling to stay focused. "Storage. Facility. Outside city limits. But you don't understand. He's got people everywhere. Judges, cops." His voice trailed off into a pained groan. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer with each passing second. Ryan knew they were running out of time. Within the hour, Ryan had Lucas and his parents moved to a secondary safe house, a small apartment above a closed bookstore. The space was cramped but secure, with only one entrance and reinforced windows. The musty smell of old books wafted up through the floorboards, mixing with the staleness of long unused rooms. But something wasn't right. Milo, usually calm when they were truly safe, wouldn't stop growling at the door. The tiny German shepherd's fur stood on end, his teeth bared at shadows that shouldn't be there. His whole body trembled with tension. Lucas sat on the worn couch, its springs creaking beneath him, watching Milo with worried eyes. The boy had grown too wise to danger in the past few days, learning to read the signs that most adults would miss. "They're coming again, aren't they?" he whispered to Ryan, his small hands clenched into fists. Ryan looked at the boy's face, seeing courage there, despite the fear that made his lower lip quiver slightly. He couldn't bring himself to lie. "Yes." Lucas nodded, pulling Milo closer to his chest. The puppy's growl never ceased, rumbling through his tiny body like a warning bell. As night descended over the city, Ryan took his position by the window, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. His gun rested on his lap, loaded and ready. The street lights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks, and not even a car passed by. The silence felt wrong, like a held breath before a scream, heavy with anticipation. Ryan checked his phone for the 10th time in as many minutes. No updates from Holloway about Calloway's condition. No word about Kincaid's whereabouts. Just silence, broken only by the soft sound of Lucas's breathing and Milo's constant growling. Milo's growling grew louder in the darkness, his hackles rising even higher. The next attack was coming, and this time Ryan knew. It wouldn't be just a warning. They would come with everything they had. The secondary safe house sat nestled among overgrown trees, far from the city's constant hum. Through the window, Ryan watched the darkness, his fingers drumming quietly on his holstered gun. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 2:17 a.m., its green glow the only real light in the room. In the bedroom down the hall, Lucas slept fitfully, with Milo pressed against his side. The tiny German shepherd hadn't left the boy's side since they arrived, maintaining his silent vigil. Ryan's phone buzzed against the wooden windowsill, the screen lighting up with blocked number. His jaw tightened as he answered. Officer Brooks. Mason Kincaid's voice oozed through the speaker, smooth as honey, but twice as toxic. You should have let this go. Ryan moved away from the window, keeping his voice low. You're the one who should have stayed away, Kincaid. Am I? Kincaid's amusement was palpable. You're running out of options, officer. Your department is compromised. Your safe houses are known. And yet, here you are, playing hero. You're running out of options, Kincaid, Ryan countered, though his stomach churned. We have evidence, names, locations. A dark chuckle crackled through the line. You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming. The call went dead. Ryan's hands were steady as he lowered the phone, but his mind raced. He moved to the security monitors they'd set up, scanning the feeds from cameras hidden around the property. The night vision display showed the empty driveway, the still trees, the quiet street. There, a shadow moved between the trees. Then another. Ryan leaned closer to the screen, counting the figures. 3. No. 4 shapes melted through the darkness, moving with practiced precision. Suddenly, Milo burst from the bedroom, his small body rigid with alertness. The puppy's bark cut through the silence like a knife, his eyes fixed on the front door. Lucas, Ryan called out, already moving. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, we need to go, now! He heard shuffling, confused voices, feet hitting the floor. His hand reached for his keys on the counter. The lights went out. All of them. Even the security monitors blinked into darkness. In the pitch black, Milo's growls grew deeper, more urgent. They weren't just watching anymore. They were coming. A deafening crash shattered the silence as the front door splintered inward. Ryan's training kicked in instantly, his body moving before his mind could process. He pushed Lucas and Mrs. Taylor behind him, gun steady in his hands as he backed them away from the noise. More crashes followed. Windows breaking, wood splintering. Heavy boots thundered across the floor. Through the darkness, Ryan made out multiple shadows moving with military precision. A metallic object rolled across the hardwood, coming to rest in the center of the living room. Ryan's eyes widened as he recognized the distinctive shape of a smoke grenade. Move, he ordered, already shoving Lucas and his mother toward the back door. Thick gray smoke began filling the room, making their eyes water and throats burn. But as they reached the back entrance, Ryan spotted more figures through the glass, their outlines stark against the moonlight. They were completely surrounded. Milo planted himself firmly between Lucas and the approaching shadows, his small body vibrating with a fierce growl that seemed too big for his size. The puppy's teeth gleamed in the darkness as he snarled at the intruders. Ryan's mind raced. They couldn't fight, not against these numbers, not with a child to protect. His eyes darted to the basement door, their last option. This way, he whispered urgently, guiding them toward the stairs. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Glass shattered behind them as the attackers burst through the windows. Ryan yanked open the basement door, ushering Lucas and his mother down the stairs. Milo stuck close to Lucas's heels, still growling. At the bottom of the basement, Ryan shoved aside an old rug, revealing the emergency hatch they'd installed. The metal creaked as he pulled it open, revealing the tunnel that led out beneath the house. "Go," he ordered, helping Mrs. Taylor through first, then Lucas. Milo jumped down after them without hesitation. Footsteps thundered down the basement stairs. Ryan slipped through the hatch, pulling it closed just as flashlight beams cut through the darkness above. They emerged from the tunnel into the cool night air, the thick forest looming before them. Ryan led them deeper into the woods, staying low and moving fast. Behind them, shouts echoed through the trees as their pursuers realized where they'd gone. His heart pounded against his ribs as they pushed through the undergrowth. He knew the attackers wouldn't give up, not when they were this close to Lucas. But Ryan wasn't just running blindly into the forest. He was leading them exactly where he wanted them to go. The forest was pitch black, branches scratching at their faces as Ryan guided Lucas and his family through the thick undergrowth. Every snap of a twig made them freeze, hearts pounding. Milo padded silently beside Lucas, the puppy's ears constantly swiveling, alert to any danger. Ryan checked his watch in the dim moonlight. They had maybe 5 minutes before Kincaid's men caught up. The attackers knew these woods. They'd chosen this location for the ambush. But Ryan had chosen it too, for a very different reason. A low rumble cut through the night air, the distant sound of engines growing closer. Ryan's lips curved into a small smile. Holloway's team was right on schedule. They reached a small clearing, moonlight spilling through the canopy above. Ryan held up his hand, stopping the group. This was where they'd make their stand. Turning to Lucas, Ryan crouched down to meet the boy's eyes. The child was trembling, but there was strength there too, a resilience that hadn't been broken by all he'd been through. "Lucas, listen to me carefully," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No matter what happens, you stay with Milo. Got it?" Lucas nodded, his small fingers tightening in Milo's fur. The puppy pressed closer to the boy, a tiny guardian with the heart of a lion. Ryan straightened up, positioning himself between the family and the trees. His gun felt solid in his hands as he watched the shadows between the trunks. They were coming. Dark figures emerged from the forest like ghosts. 5, 8, 10 of them, all armed, all moving with practiced precision. And in the center, walking with casual confidence, was Mason Kincaid himself. Kincaid's expensive suit looked out of place in the wilderness. He stopped several yards away, spreading his hands in a gesture that might have seemed friendly, if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. "Officer Brooks," Kincaid's voice carried across the clearing, "this has gone on long enough. Give me the boy and you walk away. Simple as that." Ryan's response was a smirk, his gun never wavering. "Not a chance." The air grew thick with tension. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, a single gunshot split the night, and all hell broke loose. The forest erupted into a storm of gunfire and shouting. Ryan's first shot caught one of Kincaid's men in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like lightning as bullets tore through leaves and splintered tree bark. "Get down!" Ryan shouted, pushing Lucas and his parents behind a fallen log. Milo pressed close to Lucas, the puppy's small body trembling but refusing to leave the boy's side. The thunder of approaching vehicles grew louder. Suddenly, brilliant spotlights flooded the clearing. Holloway's team had arrived, their cars crashing through the underbrush. Officers poured out, weapons raised. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Chaos erupted as Kincaid's men scattered. Some surrendered immediately, others tried to fight back. The forest filled with shouts and the sound of running feet. Through the mayhem, Ryan spotted Kincaid trying to slip away into the darkness. But he wasn't the only one who noticed. Milo's ears perked up. The tiny German shepherd pulled free from Lucas's grip, darting through the chaos like a furry missile. Before Kincaid could react, Milo's teeth clamped onto his ankle. Kincaid let out a surprised yell, stumbling forward. His expensive shoes slipped on the wet leaves, and he went down hard. Ryan didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted forward, tackling Kincaid before he could recover. They hit the ground with a thud, Ryan's knee pressing into Kincaid's back as he yanked the man's arms behind him. "It's over," Ryan said, snapping his handcuffs around Kincaid's wrists. Despite being face down in the dirt, Kincaid managed a twisted smile. "You think this ends with me?" Ryan tightened the cuffs, perhaps a bit more roughly than necessary. "Yeah, I do." With Kincaid secured, Ryan looked back across the clearing. The firefight had ended. Holloway's team had rounded up most of Kincaid's men. Those who had fled wouldn't get far. The woods were surrounded. Lucas stood up from behind the log, his parents holding him close. His eyes were wide, but he wasn't crying. He looked at Ryan, then at Milo, who trotted back to him with his tail held high. The tiny puppy sat at Lucas's feet, wagging his tail proudly. The nightmare was over. The morning sun painted long shadows through the trees as the chaos of the night gave way to an eerie calm. Police sirens wailed in the distance, their sound growing closer as more backup arrived to secure the scene. Officers led Kincaid and his captured men to waiting patrol cars, their hands bound tightly behind their backs. Ryan stood near Lucas, watching as the boy held Milo close to his chest. The puppy licked Lucas's chin, drawing a small smile from the exhausted child. Though they were safe now, Ryan could still see the slight tremor in Lucas's hands as he stroked Milo's fur. Sergeant Holloway approached, his boots crunching on fallen leaves. He placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "We got them. It's over." Ryan nodded, but Kincaid's final words kept echoing in his mind. "You think this ends with me?" Something about the man's confidence, even in defeat, left an uneasy feeling in Ryan's gut. At the station, they placed Kincaid in maximum security custody. His men were scattered throughout different holding cells, but none would speak. Their silence spoke volumes about their loyalty, or their fear. The evidence team worked quickly, processing Kincaid's laptop found in his abandoned vehicle. As the data emerged, Ryan's worst fears were confirmed. Page after page of records revealed a network far larger than they'd imagined. Names, dates, locations, all pointing to an operation that stretched beyond city limits. "Look at this," one of the tech analysts called out, pointing to her screen. "These aren't just random kidnappings. There's a pattern. They were targeting specific age groups for different buyers." Ryan's stomach turned as he looked at the files. Lucas had been an anomaly, too old for their usual operations. The regular targets were much younger, more vulnerable. The boy's accidental kidnapping had exposed something much darker than they'd initially thought. Sitting at his desk, Ryan closed the case file with a heavy sigh and leaned back in his chair. They'd stopped Kincaid, but this was just the beginning. Lucas and his family would need protection, perhaps for months or even years. The network Kincaid had built wouldn't simply disappear with his arrest. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Sergeant Holloway's office, casting warm stripes across the worn carpet. Lucas sat between his parents on the old leather couch, his small frame finally relaxed after days of tension. Milo lay faithfully at his feet, the puppy's tail creating a gentle thumping sound against the floor whenever someone moved. When Ryan entered the office, his familiar presence brought a sense of comfort to the room. His smile, though tired, was genuine as he looked at Lucas. "You did good, kid," Ryan said softly, leaning against Holloway's desk. Lucas lifted his eyes to meet Ryan's, his hand absently stroking Milo's fur. "What happens now?" Sergeant Holloway cleared his throat, adjusting some papers on his desk before addressing the family. His voice was gentle but firm as he explained their next steps. The department would help them relocate, set up new identities, and ensure they stayed far away from anyone connected to Kincaid's network. Lucas's mother listened intently, nodding along until a thought seemed to strike her. Her face fell slightly as she glanced at the German Shepherd puppy at her son's feet. "But what about Milo?" she asked, her voice wavering. The room grew quiet. Holloway shifted uncomfortably in his chair, knowing the department's strict protocols about animals involved in criminal cases. Usually they were sent to shelters or redirected to K-9 training programs. It was standard procedure. Clean, simple, by the book. Lucas' fingers tightened in Milo's fur, his eyes widening with understanding. "No," he said firmly, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "He's mine." Milo looked up at Lucas, pressing closer to the boy's legs as if understanding the conversation's weight. The puppy's brown eyes moved between the adults in the room, his tail still wagging hopefully. Ryan caught Holloway's eye across the desk. They shared a knowing look, one that acknowledged both the rules they were bound by and the reality of what sat before them. Milo wasn't just evidence in a case or a stray that had wandered into their investigation. He was family. He had saved Lucas's life, led Ryan to him, and helped bring down one of the city's most dangerous criminals. Ryan straightened up, his decision already made. Some rules were meant to be broken. The morning sun cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Ryan waited, a small box tucked carefully under his arm. It had been a week since Kincaid's arrest, and today marked the last time he would see Lucas and his family before their relocation program began. When their car pulled up, Milo's excited bark echoed through the lot before anyone even opened a door. The puppy bounded out as soon as Lucas did, his tail wagging with such force his whole body wiggled. Despite everything they'd been through, the sight of the boy and his loyal companion brought a warm smile to Ryan's face. "Officer Brooks," Lucas called out, his voice stronger than it had been during the ordeal. Milo circled around them both, unable to contain his enthusiasm. Lucas noticed the box in Ryan's hands, his head tilting with curiosity. "What's that?" Ryan knelt down to Lucas's level, the concrete rough against his knee. With careful movements, he opened the small box, revealing what lay inside. The morning light caught the metallic surface of a miniature police badge, causing it to gleam. Etched carefully into its surface was a single name: Milo. "He's an honorary K-9 now," Ryan explained, his voice warm with pride. The change in Lucas's expression was immediate and profound. His eyes lit up with pure joy, a spark of childhood wonder breaking through the trauma of recent events. It was the kind of smile that reached his eyes, transforming his whole face. For the first time since the nightmare began, Lucas truly looked like a 10-year-old boy again. Milo barked excitedly, as if understanding the significance of the moment. His tail wagged even faster as Lucas showed him the badge, the puppy's nose sniffing the shiny surface with interest. Ryan reached out and ruffled Milo's fur affectionately. "Take care of him, partner," he said softly. He stood back and watched as Lucas and his family loaded into their car for the last time, Milo settling happily in Lucas's lap. As they drove away toward their new future, Ryan exhaled deeply. Some endings weren't perfect, but this felt right. Days after Lucas and his family departed, Ryan sat in Sergeant Holloway's dimly lit office, his fingers tracing the edges of his badge. The metal felt heavier somehow, weighted with everything he'd witnessed. The case had stripped away his illusions about the world he served to protect. Kincaid wasn't just one criminal. He was a window into a darkness that ran deeper than Ryan had ever imagined. A darkness that had stolen the innocence from too many children. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty blinds, casting striped shadows across the desk between them. Ryan's coffee sat untouched, growing cold as his thoughts churned. The steam had long since stopped rising from the ceramic mug, much like his old certainties about his role in law enforcement had evaporated. Holloway watched him from across the desk, his experienced eyes reading the conflict in his officer's expression. Years of service had taught him to recognize this moment, when an officer either broke or found their true calling. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them like a rubber band ready to snap. Ryan's head snapped up, his response immediate and firm. "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'm thinking of doing more." His jaw set with determination, and his shoulders straightened as if already bearing new responsibility. Understanding crossed Holloway's weathered face, the same face that had seen countless officers come and go. He leaned forward, his chair creaking slightly under his weight. "We could use someone in trafficking investigations," he offered, his tone measured but encouraging. "The unit's expanding after this case. They need good people, people who understand what we're really fighting." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. A new unit, a new fight, a chance to stop more Kincaids before they could hurt more children like Lucas. The choice felt less like a career move and more like answering a calling. Ryan stood up slowly, his decision made. With deliberate movements, he pinned his badge back onto his belt where it belonged, where it had always belonged. As he walked out of Holloway's office, something caught his eye in the training yard below. A small German Shepherd puppy was running through basic commands with one of the K9 handlers, its tail wagging with enthusiasm, its eager barks carrying up through the window. For just a moment, Ryan almost called out for Milo. Then he smiled, remembering the way Lucas had held his brave little companion as they drove away to their new life, both of them healing each other with every passing day. Milo was exactly where he belonged, protecting the boy who needed him most. A guardian angel with 4 paws and a heart of gold. And Ryan? He was exactly where he needed to be, ready to fight the darkness that lurked in the shadows of their city, one case at a time. If you enjoyed the story of Ryan and Milo, I handpicked this next story that you will love. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.